Headlines in the French press this Friday morning with Solange Mugin, who joins me here on set. And Solange, this morning the French papers are talking very much about the government's plan to combat Islamic radicalisation here on French soil.
Yeah, it's the front page of Le Figaro this morning, and they actually go into it quite extensively inside the paper. This is the third plan in 4 years to combat Islamic radicalization. Now, later today in Lille, the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, will discuss how he and Emmanuel Macron are going to try and combat radicalization and sort of learn from the mistakes of the past. Now, if we look at Le Figaro's below the page, it explains that this is a continued, it's coming up in a minute there, it's a continued fight, and one of the things that they're going to be doing is fighting it online by combating jihadist propaganda. The government is already working with search engines like Google to make sure that in the algorithms, anti-jihadist testimonials of people who have gone to Syria and come back and said it was a horror trip, that comes up relatively high in the search results. But Le Figaro says that such testimonials, unfortunately, pale in comparison to some glorified images of war and the jihad.
Well, sticking with radical Islam, the French government has also announced the number of jihadists that French soldiers have killed in Africa since Operation Barkhane began in 2014. Yeah,
450 jihadists. That's the number that the French government, the French Defense Department came out with in the past 3.5 years. Now, it's important to keep in mind that this news comes and was published the day after 2 French soldiers were killed by a sort of homemade bomb and a homemade explosive in Mali. And so it's sort of a countermeasure, an important reminder of the importance of the French army's work there. Now, Aujourd'hui en France, Le Parisien also profiles Iyad al-Ghali. He is a man that the French army says is their #1 target. The defense ministry says that they've designated a specific mission just to try and catch him. He's 60 years old, he's a Tuareg, and he's one of the leaders of the jihadist group in Mali.
OK, let's move on now, Solange. The French President Emmanuel Macron is in Brussels this Friday to discuss with G5 Sahel countries about how France and Africa can work more closely together. Obviously, this is a big fundraising event as well. But Macron will also be taking part in another set of talks in the Belgian capital. Yeah,
while the G5 Sahel talks are going on, there's also an informal summit of EU leaders, and Le Parisien has profiled that on their front page. It says, now that he's conquered France, now he wants Europe. Now Macron has set his sights on Europe. So what does that mean? That means that Macron is going to try and basically, the Macron government says that they have a plan in place for the long term to try and convince French people that Europe is protecting them, but also to try and get their own party members, the Macron party members, into European Parliament in the 2019. So this is relatively far off elections. So there's a lot of sort of wheeling dealing behind the scenes in that regard.
And German interests and the interests of certain EU politicians might also be at play. That's according to the French left-wing paper Libération.
Yeah, Libération has a double-page spread today on Martin Selmayr.
Try and see that.
Yeah, sorry.
Almost.
Almost. Here we go. Voila. There we go. Martin Selmayr, there he is, with Jean-Claude Juncker. Now, he was named to head the commission, Juncker's commission, on Wednesday. But Libération explains that the nomination came as a shocker, that it didn't go through sort of the normal channels of discussion. Now, the paper also says that Selmayr, who is also often called Rasputin or the monster in some EU circles, so he's not very well liked by everyone, will be able to set his agenda for a long time to come. And the paper also explains that by putting Selmayr at the helm of the commission, now 3 out of 4, and this is the Germany part, 3 out of 4 EU institutions are run by German nationals.
There's also been a bit of brouhaha, a bit of controversy about a woman who's set to play Joan of Arc.
Yeah, this is a more sort of local story, but it does have national implications to a certain extent. Every year, so you have to understand the backstory, every year for the past 589 years, a young woman has been chosen to portray Joan of Arc at a festival in Orléans, which is a city southwest of Paris. Well, earlier this week, Mathilde Eddy Gamassou was chosen. She's 17. She's an excellent student and a resident.
This isn't her, by the way.
No, this is Joan of Arc, yes. But she actually happens to be half black. And this is the first time in the April-May festival that a person of color has been chosen. Well, West France explains in an article from yesterday, actually, that she has received racist insults and a lot of backlash because of the color of her skin and because she's portraying one of the major symbols of France. Well, that's the bad news. The good news is that a local paper, La République du Centre, explains that a lot of people have come out to support her, be it French athletes, politicians, local citizens. They say that her nomination is a way of sort of taking back, and this is the national element, taking back the symbol of Joan of Arc from it being usurped by the National Front. Every year the National Front goes in front of the statue of Joan of Arc and sort of portrays her as their symbol. So this is a way of changing that.
Okay, Solange Moujan with the French Press Review. Thank you very much. I'm back in just a few moments' time with the latest headlines and more world news. In the next 30 minutes, we'll also be bringing you our Focus report, which this Friday looks at how cyber police here in France are trying to stop criminal activities on a hidden part of the internet, which is better known as the dark web. Do stay with us here on France 24 for that and much more still to come.